Hello and welcome to this episode of The Agency Show. I'm Yash, your host, and joining me today is Preston, who works on growth and strategy at Milo. Milo helps over 170,000 freelancers thrive through their articles, podcast episodes, guides, and courses. The mission is to help freelancers achieve freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. They also have another platform called Solid Gigs, which delivers the best freelancing opportunities straight to your inbox. Today, Preston is joining me to talk about some of the most common mistakes that freelancers make and how can those be avoided. Thank you, Preston, for taking out the time and joining us on the Agency Show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So I'll straight dive into the topic. Right? So one of the key questions, and so just for some context, we ourselves used to run an agency as well. So we used to be an IT agency, grew it from a 2 people operation to a 55 people operation, and we did web and mobile applications and so on and so forth. And so one of the challenges that I personally faced as an agency owner was also saying no to clients. And so if you're, and it becomes as much, so much harder if you're just a freelancer, right? And so as a freelancer or a very, very small agency owner, like 2 or 3 people practice, how do you say no to a client?
Yeah, so I mean, this you're right. It's a very common issue, and it can cause huge problems because a lot of times clients will tack on extra things that need done. We call this scope creep, if you've never heard it before, right?
Yeah.
So if you have clients who are constantly tacking on, like, could we just add this, or could we just change this, or whatever, outside of the original scope that you agreed to, those things can add up over time, and then your profit margins go down because you're doing more work than you originally planned. And it can be really detrimental, especially like you said, for a 1 or 2 person or 3 person business. For me, I like to actually turn it around and turn scope creep into a positive thing for my business. It's been a while since I've had worked with clients directly that have had that issue, just because I've sort of worked it out of my business, but it definitely happened to me in my early days of freelancing. And I think what I found, and a few mentors sort of guided me in the right direction on this thinking, but the truth of the matter is scope creep can actually be a really good thing for your business if you handle it correctly. And that is, scope creep without any additional income or revenue is obviously bad. You're doing more work for the same amount of money. But scope creep that you can come back to the client and say, that sounds like a great idea, here's what it will cost, is fantastic, because then you're just adding to the bill that you're going to send the client, or that you have sent the client, right? And so you're really just increasing your revenue per client at that point. And so instead of just jumping immediately to saying no, you may want to say, sure, here's what it will cost, or here's what it will require, here's what we'll have to give up, here's how the timeline will change, here's how the budget will change. And you just explore the options with them. They may choose to say, well, never mind, we don't want it badly enough to pay an extra $1,000, or they might say, great, it's totally worth it for us to pay an extra $1,000. We'd love to have that added. And so if you can be flexible with your client, then you can actually use that as an opportunity to grow your revenue for the project itself.
Fair. And so what you're saying is that don't say no to scope creep, just say no to doing it for free, and without having actually to say no. So just come back to them. So accept this scope creep, and then come back to them and speak to them about how it impacts the timeline, how it impacts the cost, how it impacts all the initial projections that could have been made, and then turn that into a longer conversation, which it's a win/no lose situation, right? So if they end up paying you more for the scope creep, then you end up having a larger ticket. If they don't go ahead, then there was no scope creep. So they've essentially said no to themselves. And so that's an interesting insight. I should have done this. So here's the next question that I kind of have for you is that when you're a freelancer or an agency, you'll always have a cycle of feast and famine, right? And so there'll be times when you'll have more work than you can handle. And then there will be times when there's just no work just coming your way, right? Or you're just getting not great clients or not great projects, or you're not getting work that you can sink your teeth into. And so that cycle of feast and famine, how as a freelancer in very early stages, how do you make sure that you have consistent work that's coming your way, or how do you get over the feast and famine cycle?
Great question. It is definitely, I'd say, even more common than this scope creep issue that we talked about before. Overcoming this feast famine issue, especially when you're brand new, trying to get your feet under you, trying to get your business off the ground. In the first few years, it can feel like every month high, then a month low, then a month high, then a month low.
Yeah.
And what happens actually is this is actually, in my experience, a byproduct of having a one person or a two person business, where you are not only responsible for the work that gets done for the clients and sending invoices and all of that work, but you're also responsible for marketing and promoting your business. And so what we see happens is, in January, you don't have any work. And so you do a ton of marketing. You're way up here on marketing and promotion. And so that leads to February being way up here in terms of client work and revenue, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as in February, you're doing lots of client work and revenue, you're too busy then to do the other half of your responsibilities, which is marketing and promoting your business. And so it sort of creates this, these two waves that are in exact opposition to one another, right?
Yeah.
1 month you're high on promotion because you don't have any client work to do. And the next month you have plenty of client work, so you're low on promotion. And because your sales activity is cyclical, then your revenue is going to be cyclical as well. It just follows the natural pattern. And so what you have to do then to solve that is find a way to make your sales cycle not cyclical. You want to keep sales up here all the time so that then revenue and projects can stay up there all the time. And sometimes that means hiring someone to help you with sales activities. Sometimes that means using some sort of software to automate your sales and outreach. Sometimes that means taking on fewer projects and charging a little bit more so that you always have dedicated time each week to promote your business. There are lots of ways to solve it, but what you have to do is say, how do I keep my sales activity high all the time so that I can keep my revenue and client projects high all the time?
Makes sense. And so I think the aspect of making sure that you have dedicated amount of time consistently that goes onto your sales and marketing activities is something that could definitely help with the feast and famine situation that you may have going on. And so the other thing that's interesting that you said was that as a freelancer, you're responsible for everything that's happening in your business, right? So you're responsible for invoices, and you're responsible for sales, and you're responsible for deliveries and negotiation and actually getting the work done as well. And in my experience, and I'm sure you would have also come across freelancers who are just brilliant at their at doing what you want them to do, right? So you'll come across brilliant graphic designers, amazing folks at SEO, great content or copywriters, and still they are not able to. So you'll see a mediocre freelancer charge more because they are better at sales and marketing and positioning themselves, rather than and versus a brilliant freelancer not being able to charge more or not being able to do as impactful work. And so that kind of leads me into my next question, which is what we've learned and understood is that being great at your job or at your offering is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient one, right? And so being a great content writer, if you're a content freelancer, being great at SEO, if you're an SEO freelancer, is a necessary condition. You have to absolutely be great, but it's not sufficient for you to succeed. And a lot of freelancers struggle with that. And so would love to know and understand some, what are some of the places that these freelancers who are great at their job can go to become great at other stuff as well. So how can those specialists at their job can also have some elements of the generalist nature that are required to become a better freelancer?
That is a fantastic question. So there's a lot to unpack here. Again, you've hit it right on the head. This is something that a lot of freelancers face. This comes from where I first heard it was in the book called The E-Myth. And it actually talks about, I think, a baker who's great at baking, great at making pastries, makes delicious breads. So he decides to open a bakery. And what he soon realizes is that running a bakery has almost nothing to do with making bread. Making bread is only a small portion of the work that he has to do every day. He has to, find a building and find equipment, and he has to pay for that equipment, and he has to find customers, and he has to satisfy those customers and get them to come back. And freelancers face all of those same issues. I might be a great web developer, but if I can't get anyone to hire me to develop their website, and I can't get referrals from that person, then it doesn't matter how talented I am. In fact, I'd say freelancers who are average, like they have enough talent, but they're maybe not the best in the world, but they have some good marketing and promotion and entrepreneurial skills. I think they'll actually succeed more in business than someone who is the absolute best at their craft, but can't run a business. And so if you're going to run a business yourself, you have to recognize that there's a give and take there. You might not be able to be the absolute best in your field, because you also have to dedicate time to being an entrepreneur and to running a business and growing a business. And that takes as much time or more as this other craft. And so it's something we talk about all the time on our blog. In fact, we've had people tell us that the stuff we give away for free is even better than maybe some of the premium stuff you can find online, courses and that sort of thing that you pay for. So we publish podcast episodes on our podcast. It's called Freelance to Founder. We publish articles on our blog. Multiple times a week, we have experts from all over the world who are succeeding in the business of freelancing, sharing their experience as freelancers, what's working and what's not. We have a Facebook group with over 10,000 people in it. Like, there are tons of opportunity just within the Millo brand, if I can shamelessly plug our brand, all for free, where you can come and you can learn how to grow a business. You can learn what tools to use. You can learn how to find clients. You can learn all of the business side of freelancing so that you can stay great at your skill set, whatever it is, but you can also become great at being an entrepreneur. So that's a resource that I would point people towards. Obviously, there's lots of other resources, Skillshare and Udemy and some of these course sites. They have great, like, very niche courses on finding a client or drafting an invoice or things like that. You can also use software tools. I mean, obviously, Linkjoy is a great software tool that can help you sort of manage your business. So you don't have to do it all from scratch in spreadsheets or anything like that. You can use software to keep track of your clients, to send invoices, to do all these tasks that you might be overwhelmed with. There's definitely tons of resources out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so wherever you guys are watching this or listening to this, we're going to be linking Milo's all the resource links and their podcast links in the description. And so do look out for that and check those out as well. I myself also fairly regularly go through their blogs and articles. I will surely check out the podcast as well, but I've gone through the blogs and articles and the kind of insights that you'll be able to find over there. The idea is that if you dedicate, let's say, about a couple of hours every week to learning and understanding the generalist aspect of the freelance business, and if that helps you make 3 right decisions in this year, you would have essentially recovered your investment 10 times over, right? And so that's kind of how we encourage even our users and our customers to look at things, and how freelancers might also want to consider looking at things as well. The other thing that I also let's talk about the topic. What are the top 3 mistakes, most common mistakes that you see in freelancers or early stage freelancers or small agency owners make?
Well, we've talked about one of them already, so I don't think we need to maybe rehash that, and that is the feast-famine cycle, where you spend not enough time selling. So that's definitely one of the absolute biggest mistakes I've seen. Another massive mistake that I see freelancers make all the time has to do with their portfolio, and I've talked about this on other podcasts. I've written articles all over the internet about it. I feel like I've talked about this forever, and it's because it's such a prevalent problem. And that is that freelancers quite often see their portfolio as a way to show off their work, instead of using a portfolio as a way to attract and close deals with clients. And so what happens is freelancers spend all this time sort of behind the scenes making their website perfect, and the logo has to look just right, and the button has to animate and like all this stuff has to happen. And they haven't given really much thought at all to the client journey from the first time they come to your website until they convert to a client. And instead, if you can pare down, and what I call it a minimum viable portfolio. I sort of stole that term from the startup world, right? A minimum viable product, but I call it a minimum viable portfolio. And it's like, what's the bare minimum I can put on one web page, or maybe 2 or 3 pages at most, to convince a potential client to hire me? I might have a couple case studies. I will definitely have an easy to use like contact form or messaging form or something, some way they can get a hold of me, a phone number. And then I'll have, maybe some testimonials from clients, but I'm not going to have like galleries and galleries and galleries of things I've done in the past. I'm not going to have lengthy case studies where they just go on forever. I'm not going to have hour-long videos, because when people are investigating someone to hire, they don't interact that way with websites. They glance quickly, they read a few things, they get sort of a gut feeling, a gut check, and then they sort of make a score in their mind maybe, and they add you to a list, or they don't add you to a list to follow up with. And so you have to think of your portfolio as a sales page, as almost a funnel, as a journey where complete strangers are going to go to that website and they eventually begin to trust you more and more, and then they eventually hire you. And the more you can solidify that process through your portfolio, the better off you're going to be. And then the other mistake that I see freelancers make all the time is just the classic not charging enough money. Now, I say that with a caveat because I hate it when freelancers who have been freelancing for 10, 15, 20 years say to brand new freelancers, you're not charging enough, charge what you're worth more than that. Because quite often beginning freelancers aren't worth a lot more than what they're charging. They're trying to get their feet under them. They're trying to get some experience. They're trying to get some testimonials. And I think that's fine. Charge a lower rate. Charge definitely at the level of service that you provide, but don't stay there. I think that's what happens to a lot of freelancers is year after year after year, they stay at the same price. And pretty soon they're 10, 15 years down the road and they're still charging what they were charging in the first couple of years of freelancing. And it's just not fair to them. It doesn't reflect the value that they bring to their clients. And so it's time to increase, your rates at that point. And I'd say even earlier on, a year in, increase your rates, do it again at 2 years. When you start to get pushback, people a lot of times will ask like, how do I know when I've hit the right price? Well, raise it, keep raising it until you get some pushback, and you might lose a couple deals. That's fine. But once you start to get pushback, you'll know that that's the moment where you can maybe stop raising your rates.
So the second point that you shared, right, about having the perfect logo and having endless case studies, that's like first 2 years of my agency. that's what I spent my time on. I wanted to have the perfect website and really lengthy case studies and all of that, because it's so well put when you said that people think, freelancers think, or agencies think of their portfolio as a way of showcasing the work rather than essentially kind of a way to get more clients. And so we ourselves would create fairly lengthy portfolios, and even today I see a lot of you come across a designer's portfolio which just has random visiting cards and random letterheads and stuff like that, just designed without any context, and that just kind of goes on and on. So that's super interesting. And in terms of pricing as well, like one of the things that kind of leads me to the next question, right? The amount that a freelancer can charge, you can always charge what the market will pay, but the market pays differently in different places. And so as an example, over here in India, if I'm let's say a graphic design freelancer, I can charge probably somewhere close to $10 an hour or something like that, and the market might pay something to that effect. Versus if I'm sitting over here and if the client is in the US, I'd probably be able to push that to about $22 an hour as well. And so that's or probably even more, depending on the experience that I have and the kind of client that I'm working with. And so the question that I'm trying to get to is how do you identify the right client for the skill set that you have? Um, I mean, I'm not actually able to completely explain this to you, but as a freelancer, you might also have faced this pain. That let's say you're a graphic designer, how do you arrive to an ideal customer profile? Because anyone could need graphic designing. So from there, how do you start your journey?
Yeah, I think the answer is going to be different depending on what stage of freelancing you're in. So if you haven't done really any freelance work at all, the answer is going to be different than if you're 5 years into your freelancing and still going, I'm not really doing the kind of work I want to be doing. You know, I haven't really found my people. I haven't found the right kinds of projects. But I think there are a couple things that maybe span both of those scenarios. And for me, it's about, yes, geography can play a role, right? Yes, there are different markets with different price points. But for me, in the global economy, there are so many ways. Now, of course, not every country is as open as others, as maybe as India and the US, but certainly in many countries around the world, you have access to platforms like Upwork or like Fiverr, where if your talent matches with the talent of other freelancers, you can charge close to what they're charging, regardless of where you live in the world. Now, keep in mind, some clients will pay a premium to have a freelancer in their same time zone. So you might have the same skill set, but if you live in a different time zone, you might not be able to charge as much with certain clients. Some clients want people to be available on the phone anytime they call. So they prefer they're in the same time zone and working the same hours as they are, more or less. Some people prefer to have freelancers who work opposite time zones so that they can get something done. And when they show up in the office the next morning, it's ready for review. So there are different things you can charge for, I think. But I think for me, it comes down to, you know, at Millo, a big part of our mission is helping freelancers build a business that makes them happy, right? Not the kind of business we say you should have, not the kind of business Gary Vaynerchuk says you should have, not the kind of business anyone says you should have, but the kind of business that makes you happy, right? And so a big question that we encourage people to ask is, what kind of work do I want to be doing? Right. And so, yes, you could, when it comes to target audience, you could say, where's the most money to be found? And if you really just care most about money, you could do that. I prefer to say, what are the kinds of projects that will make me excited to wake up in the morning, right? What are the kinds of projects I'll be proud to share with people I care about? What are the kinds of projects that get me excited, that challenge me, that I believe in their, you know, I believe in the cause maybe that the project is supporting, or I believe in their mission, or I agree with their principles and their values. And so there's a lot that goes into it for me when choosing someone to work with. And once you get kind of solid on that, you can then identify within companies that excite you. Then you can say, who would I think would be willing to pay me what I believe I'm worth? And then it's really easy to say, like, well, it's clear these guys, they have a great mission, but they have no budget. And so there might come a point in your freelancing career where you could take on a client with a very low budget just because you believe in their mission, right? But if you're fairly early on, you might say, I believe in your mission. I love what you're doing. I'd love to help you in the future when you have a budget. But right now, you know, it's not going to work. And so, so for me, budget is kind of the last factor, but it is definitely a factor, right? If you're not paying attention to budget, you're not in business. And so you have to pay attention to the money side of it, of course, but it definitely doesn't ever come first for me. And I think the most fulfilled freelancers are the ones where money isn't the very primary concern.
Yeah, fair point here. And so there was an interesting thing that you mentioned in while you were speaking as well, where you know, you said that some clients want freelancers to be available, you know, on the phone so that they can directly call them and get something resolved right there and then. And so that kind of brings me to my next question, which is since if you're a freelancer, you're doing everything from start to finish. You're the boss, you're the intern, and you're everything in the middle as well. So like, what are some of the tips that you could share for freelancers to, and we've seen very unhealthy working conditions for some freelancers, in the sense that they don't have any work-life balance. And so there will be a couple of days where they are completely, just available and free. And then there will be days where they are working 14 hours days or 12-hour days, and stuff like that. So what are some of the tips that you'd share for freelancers who, and help them kind of achieve work-life balance?
This is a critical part of what we talk about at Millo a lot. Again, because we want to help freelancers build a business that makes them happy. And you might be bringing in lots of money, but if you're working 14-hour days over and over and over and never getting weekends or holidays or anything, you're not happy. You're not going to be happy in the long term. And so, most freelancers, they get into freelancing because they want to spend more time with their family. They want to spend more time on hobbies. They want to have more flexibility and freedom, and they want to feel more fulfilled at work. And then, if you're not careful, you end up getting stuck in this cycle of just being overworked and being tired and feeling like you have to work or you don't get paid. So there are a couple of ways that can be remedied. I have two that I'll share today. So first would be, you have to get really serious about the processes that you build into your business. The more processes you can have, the more clarity you can find around your own processes, the less overworked you will feel, because you don't have to figure out over again how you're going to accomplish something every time it comes up, every time it hits your to-do list. Instead, you're going to say, oh, a client just reached out on my form on my website. And then you'll either have an automation set up with software, or you'll have a copy paste sort of template that you can automatically respond within a couple minutes to that client, instead of feeling like you have to do it from scratch every time, right? And so that saves you just, maybe just a few minutes, but that compounds over multiple processes and multiple tasks throughout your day. That can compound, and it can really add up, and that's what leads to really long work days. The other thing I would say is, quite often, I do, like I mentioned, I do this podcast with my friend Clay on Freelance to Founder, and we talk a lot about using recurring revenue to scale your business. So instead of, we hate proposals. We think proposals are not necessarily the best way to go unless you can sort of templatize them and automate them. I guess I should say customized proposals with, it comes back to like the portfolio, just so much detail that no one reads, so much time spent. Instead, figure out a couple packages that you could potentially sell. So instead of a custom proposal, every time a client reaches out, you say, here are 3 packages I offer. One's $200 a month, one's $500 a month, one's $1,000 a month, right? And here's what you'll get for each of those. Then, maybe you put them on a 6-month or a 12-month contract. So all of a sudden, if you can get someone on a 12-month contract at $200 a month, you know exactly how much you're going to make in the next 12 months. And that can be very liberating, because then you have to do the work, right, to pay for that. But you can also hire people to help you. If you're starting to work too long of hours, you have money coming in, so you could hire someone to help. You can you can raise your rates, because you realize, if I'm going to do a certain amount of work for this client, I'm going to have to actually charge $300 or $400 a month, and the value is there. And so you can, it really like sets this anchor point where you can say, like, I can scale my business because I know where the money's coming from, and I know how much, and I know when, right? And so I think sort of treating your service more like a product. We hear this term productize all the time, productizing your service. I think that can really, really pay off for freelancers who feel like they're overworked and don't have any time.
And so itemizing the services or productizing the services, as it's called, is something. And this can also partly solve the problem of feast and famine as well, right? Because
absolutely, 100%.
So now you know that you're going to make $200 a month for the next 12 months, and let's say if your target is to do probably $3,000 a month or $5,000 a month from freelancing, then you know that with this one client at $200 a month, you still have like 25 open slots. and so this is the number of clients that you need to get. And so if you're able to itemize them, it kind of helps over there as well. And so this brings me to my last question for you today is how do you make sure, so one of the things is always this, that communication always happens when the other person has understood what you wanted them to understand and not when you have said it. So a lot of times what might happen is that a freelancer would say something, but since the client does not belong to the same field, they may not actually understand what the freelancer is saying, or at least maybe understand in the words, but not in spirit, or maybe not understand the consequences. And this we've seen happen all the time, specifically in design or IT service freelancers as well. And so how do you, what are some of the systems and processes that a freelancer could have in place? And that could include, let's say, contracts or proposals or scope of work documents, or I'm not sure. So what are some of those things that a freelancer should always make sure that they have when they are onboarding a client, right? Or what are some of the systems and processes that they need to have to make sure the client understands what they are proposing or what they are offering?
Yeah, again, I think this varies depending on what stage you're at in your freelance business. I would say early on, I wouldn't worry about this kind of thing as much.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of thing feels like something that'll get in the way more than it'll help early on in your business.
Got it.
Later down the road, as you are charging more, you have higher ticket clients, you have maybe employees you have to pay, you have more cash flow, and there's maybe a little more at stake. Then these kinds of things definitely start to matter more, right?
Yeah.
So I would say if we're sticking with this idea of creating packages, productized packages of your services, that's a great first step. So you list exactly what your client is going to get for $200 a month, or for $500 a month, or $1,000 a month, and you say, here's what you're not going to get, right? You're not going to get, you can't call me at all hours. Like, you find a friendly, positive way to spin that, but you say, I'm not just your personal employee. You can't just call me at any time or whatever. So, but you say, here's what you will get. I will, provide, if you're a writer, maybe I'll write, 4 articles a month, and I'll have them optimized for keywords that you identify, and whatever it might be, right? So you can outline exactly what they're going to get. I think too, you could potentially, I think over time you'll start to recognize where maybe some of those communication gaps are. So if you say to a client, I will write an SEO optimized article for you, right? They might think that means I will write an article that will rank #1 in Google, right?
Happens all the time.
Definitely happens all the time. And so that's definitely a different promise. If you're in the SEO field at all, you know that you shouldn't promise that you can reach #1 in Google, right? But what you can promise is that you'll write a high quality, well optimized, completely original piece of content, right? So there are things you can promise. There are things that you can even say, here's what this doesn't guarantee. It does not guarantee we'll be #1 in Google, although we will write it as best as we can, and we think it's likely that we might rank first page, right? So you can kind of get some clarity around, what your offering actually promises.
Fair. Yeah, I think that's super helpful here. And so a large amount of a large percentage of the client management challenges actually come from these communication gaps. And I think one of the things that you rightly pointed out is that it's not as big of a concern in the early stage of the freelancing journey. And probably over a period of time, as and when you have more experiences and some misunderstandings might have already happened. And so you could just kind of identify those points and plug in those holes. And that kind of could help you become a better freelancer as well. All right, so this brings me to the end of this episode, and it's been an awesome conversation. We've had a lot of things to learn from you, Preston. What are your final thoughts?
I just appreciate being here, and love what you're working on over there as well. I think you're doing some great work for freelancers. So thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you, Preston, for the time, and we will be speaking soon. Guys, I have, again, just to remind you, I have linked Milo and all the other links that come associated with it, including the podcasts. And they've actually got a lot of different subcategories on their website. And so I'll be linking those in the description, wherever it is, whether it's Spotify or YouTube or Facebook. You'll be able to find that in the description over here. And so do check out Milo. They're doing some amazing work in making and in helping freelancers become better founders and do fulfilling work for themselves. And so thank you, Preston, for joining in on this conversation, and we'll be speaking soon as well. Bye-bye.
That sounds great. Yeah, thank you so much.